one of the things that I haven't heard you talk about too much, but there's something about what you said with him that brings it up to me, is that he sees this hierarchy or this religious structure as a totalitarian impulse, as this kind of structure that comes down and manifests itself. One of the things that comes down from the mountain, let's say in religious stories, is also compassion. Without the hierarchy, is it possible for there to be compassion? Because compassion is also the manner in which we accept that nothing ever reaches the ideal, that we can recognize it, but we also know that it's always kind of beyond us. And so there is a sense that it's judging us. There's also a sense in which it kind of yields because, every glass is imperfect and everything, every house is imperfect, every building, everything that we notice, we can also see that it doesn't reach that ideal. I don't know if you ever thought about that a little bit.
Well, let me think about that for a second.
We've never talked about compassion before, so.
Yeah, well, when I think about compassion, I mean, first of all, I do not believe that compassion is an untrammeled moral virtue. And I think one of the terrible things about our society, one of the deadly Oedipal things about our society, is that we've put compassion in the highest place unthinkingly. And compassion is for infants. And I really mean that technically. So, like, if imagine that your ethic was that you were 100% compassionate. Okay, so what are you like? Well, you're like a good mother with a child under 6 months of age. Because human babies are born premature in some fundamental sense. So, the average gestation period for a mammal of about our size should be 2 years. And so our babies are born radically premature. And there's complex reasons for that. One is that there's an evolutionary arms race between the circumference of the infant's head and the dimensions of the pelvic hole through which the baby has to pass to be born. And if the pelvis of women was any wider, they couldn't run. And if it was any narrower, then the child would die, like many children did, right? I mean, the human birth mortality rate was abysmal right up till about, certainly 100 years ago. And then babies' heads are compressible, right? The bones aren't fully formed when they're born, and often kids are born and their heads are cone-shaped because they've been subject to such pressure during birth. So it's a narrow needle to thread, and there's been a lot of evolutionary tinkering to get that right. Now, why in the hell did I say that?
You're talking about compassion.
Sorry, I just lost my place.
No,
compassion,
right.
yes.
We're talking about the excess of compassion.
Yes. Sorry about that. So our infants are born unbelievably helpless, and they are basically prenatal until they can crawl, and that's 7 or 8 months. And so prior to that, because they're so utterly helpless, everything they do has to be regarded as above moral reproach and 100% right. And so if you have an infant who is crying, who's 6 months old or 4 months old, your job is not to judge the infant or to punish the infant or to discipline the infant. It's like the infant has a problem, and all of your attention is to be focused on solving that problem. Period. 100%, that's it. And that's great for people who are under 6 months. But it's deadly. It's increasingly deadly as the child matures, because that kind of all-encompassing, I will do everything for you, is also the enemy of development. And that's the whole Freudian nightmare. I mean, that's what Freud put his finger on, and he knew that was the pathology of the age, the Oedipal mother. And it's like, yeah, well, welcome to the age of the Oedipal mother, everyone, because that's certainly what we see now. And so if you put compassion in the highest place, well, then that's what you have a state of being where everything is an infant. And the only hallmark of ethic is pity. Now, Jung talked about classic conceptions of what is in the highest place. God, he said, well, God rules with 2 hands, mercy and justice. And that's that discrimination. You know how bad discrimination is. It's like, well, no, it's not. It's differentiation. It's judgment. It's putting things in their proper place. It's setting the highest above the lowest. It's formulating a pathway for further development. And, a mother might say, you're just fine the way you are. But what's that to say to someone who's, 10? It's like, you're not fine the way you are. You're 10. You got a lot of growing up to do, and you're probably not fine the way you are when you're 20. It's like you're just a fraction of what you could be. And if it's all maternal compassion, and I mean that in the symbolic sense, it's all maternal compassion, it's, well, where's the impetus for development? And there's no judgment there. And I think the most dismal thing you can tell 18-year-old boys in particular, especially if they're miserable, is, well, you're just okay the way you are. And they're not, first of all, and no one thinks they are, including them. Well, they don't. No one gives a damn about malfunctioning 18-year-old boys. Like, you know, but you can say, with the proper admixture of justice and mercy, it's like, yeah, well, you know, you're not so bad for 18, and you could be way more, and good for you.
So I'm going to stop there for a minute, Jordan, again. I'm going to keep playing the video in the back, because I'm going to keep doing this with all your videos anyways. I'm going to keep playing them. And then here and there, when you say things, I'll work on them. I thought about one thing that I wanted to say in the last video, and then I got clipped off. I think the whole end of the 10-minute, last 10 minutes of the video got clipped, actually. One of the things that, in my opinion, that I think that you should change, and I think you'd have a lot better... It would prove to me anyways that this is not that the conservatives are who they try to pretend they are. Okay, let's put it that way. You're talking about young boys, 18 years old and over. Okay, I heard all the statistics. Yes, the white man is supposed to be going away under the new plan. You worked for the United Nations. How you could not know that, I have to ask. How do you not understand that that was part of the plan? The, you know, take America back, make America great again, to Biden's agenda. They're all the same agendas. They're all going to do the same thing in different ways. Divided, but together. I don't understand how you worked at the United Nations for 2 years and you don't know about mineral streets, chemtrails, geoengineering. How do you not know about that if you worked for the United Nations for 2 years? In any department, even if you were an accountant for the United Nations. I just find that hard to believe. It's the same thing with that Tulsi Gabbard lady there. I like her. She seems nice. She's very pretty. But she worked for the United Nations. Anyone that worked for the United Nations, I have to question, how could you not know all these things that I'm trying to show people? You know, I can't even talk openly about it anymore. That's how fucking bad this is. So even though I'm showing it to you on the screen right now, I'm taking these videos, I cannot even talk openly about it. I have to watch the words that I use, otherwise it's a waste of my time. The videos will get deleted, and I'm not very far away from my entire channels, more of them being taken away and shut down, and you won't even be able to get to them anymore. So this is a bunch of shit for me to have to do, but let me move on and keep trying. In the last video, what I was starting to say here about what you were just saying about the kids. Okay, so I understand what you're saying about the 18-year-old boys and everything like that. And yes, it's definitely true. Women have been discriminated against. So if you're going to say that white men are now being discriminated against, that's true. That's factual. Yes, we are. And we can do one better and even point out that it's purposeful. Yes, we all knew this was coming. Now, because it's division. It's all about dividing us every which way. But now, when you look at the fact that you have to argue with feminists about a lot of shit that they're right about, but they just don't know why they're right, and the way that they're coming off about it is wrong. And you using on the defense side of most of what they're saying, things that are also not true, even though they're true in our everyday lives, they're not true because they're true. They're only true because we made it that way, because we say it's true, not because it's really true. Like, for example, you were talking about the guy who invented the birth control pill and the tampons and all that shit. I mean, you're really not looking very deep if you're just going to shout out who we claim was the inventor of the pill, right? And you're going to claim the inventor of the maxi pad because tampons and stuff like that, because this guy was felt bad for his wife and everything like that. I mean, really, you're not being honest with yourself if that's all you're going to claim. And I know it's a little more detailed, but you're obviously very good at speaking details, staying calm, talking eloquently. That's you. So there should be no reason why you can't throw in the fact that, well, you know, this the inventor of the tampon, his wife was actually highly intelligent, very smart, knew all these different ideas for them to, but of course it was at a time in history when women were not allowed to take credit for anything, let alone an invention. No. So he got the credit for this invention. And we all knew that. And the wife was just pleased, happy to go along with that, just as every other woman was happy enough to go along with the way things were, okay? So at least be honest with ourselves as we're going along, as honest as we can. You have to push it to the limit and go against your own teachings, because I hate to tell you, Jordan, actually I love to tell you because I love telling everybody. All right, intelligence, and our intelligence, we think, you obviously heavily think, and I'll get detailed into this in the future too, because I don't need an education to tell you any of this. I don't have an education, and I don't even give a shit about that. It makes no difference to me because I can see it all, so it doesn't really matter. I don't need the fake education. All right, so you have to read between the lines of everything you've read, and you've read gazillions of letters and words and books, and they're all over in your mind. Now, everything you've ever heard, learned, thought, taught, I call programmed, has been a lie. Okay? Or I should form that in the form of a question, shouldn't I? Gee, Jordan, do you think it's possible that everything you've ever heard, learned, thought, taught, programmed has been a lie? Do you think so? I sure the fuck do. I sure think so. And there's a lot of evidence for it. We just have to look. We just have to look for ourselves. It's all around us, the evidence that everything has been a lie. Nothing to be sad about or depressed about. This is a good thing. I agree that utopia would not even be a good thing, but we can strive for it. Striving for utopia doesn't mean we get utopia, but it sure is a lot better than the shit we're about to go into. Anyways, blacks have been screwed more than browns, tans. I was thinking today, I'm not really sure, so I don't want to be doing what I am accusing you of doing, but I think reds actually have it even worse than blacks. But see, reds just came off of a red, meaning red skin, you know, redder to the reddish tint of skin color. Because see, color does matter. Everything matters with color. So that's why I'm saying you should, in my opinion, start bringing in the blacks. Not just black men, but black men and women, black people. Not brown, black people. Because see, we've all had our run on the world stage, and black humans, for some reason, were cut out. And I noticed this, and I noticed it really heavily in the last year, even more so. So what's happened was after, you know, whites took over all the islands from Europe all the way around, but when we took over all the islands, so it's at least 50-50 on all of them, right? So when you look at, well, we got the black population down to, even in their homeland, they're at best 50-50 with other colors. And then when you look at the Americas, we took all this land obviously from the reds, because they were pretty red. As you head towards Brazil, they were the Indians I'm talking about, the native Indians from all the Americas, from Canada to Brazil. They ranged in colors, but they were mostly red skins all the way through, and then towards Brazil, I think they started getting a little browner. And then, of course, the white man came in, and we whipped them all out of here too. But the point is that here, from Canada all the way to South America, we have brought them down to 12%, and we never let them get above that 12-13%. At least that's the number we're told. So we never let their numbers get back up. The discrimination against women and the discrimination against blacks is definitely true. It's been there. So we hate to say it, and because it feels shitty to say that we're bad people. But you've got experience with that. You said that when you were in your 20s, same thing with me. I went through the same thing. When you were in your 20s, you explained that you realized that you were not really as good of a liar as you thought. It's just that this is the way I explained it anyway. This is not your exact words, but it's what happened to me, and I believe happens to a lot of people. I would hope to happen to at least some people. So you come to a realization, and you say, you know what? I'm not really as good of a liar as I thought I was. What actually it is that they're all just letting me lie to them. They don't care. They're allowing me to lie to them. And then you look into it a little bit maybe, and which I did. And then I looked around and I said, oh, because they're all liars. They're all everything was a fucking, oh my, now I see. Santa Claus, Easter bunnies, Jesus, fucking, you name it. History, false science, medicine. It was a whole fucking lie. So of course they're not going to call me out on my lies. I mean, some of my lies were really ridiculous. That's what woke me up to it. I was like, how could they possibly fucking, you leave the room and you just convince 12 people that the car's all banged up and there's corn stalks hanging out of the grill and the windshield's broken and there's beer cans filled up to the fucking seat level in the car, and it's a big fucking mess, and you give them some bullshit story that they all buy, and you're drunk and you're hungover and you had a night full of drugs and cocaine and whatever. This is my story anyway, of cocaine and all kinds of bad stuff, and you can't even think straight. You give them this half-ass bullshit story, and they all say, "Oh yeah, wow, that's something. That's really something. Too bad, poor kid." And then I go back downstairs or upstairs or wherever the hell I was heading that day, and fell asleep and woke up thinking, "How could this be? How could they possibly all be so stupid? Am I that good of a liar?" I mean, and then you think back at all your other lies, and you're like, actually, they were really not all that masterful. So why would these assholes all be believing me about everything I say? They don't. They all just pretend to believe each other's lies, and that's what we all do. And what does that mean? When you really dig down to it, because you can find it, you're very close. You're very close. That's what worries me about you, is you're tiptoeing around the mirror neuron manipulator. You're tiptoeing around the mirror neuron, talking about serotonin and other things which are important, but so is a lot of other stimuli and non-stimuli. So are the heavy metals that block the energies around us from reaching our bodies, inside our bodies. So these energies, whether it's the electromagnetic current or it's the solar from the sun, the solar energy, or whether it's the energy that our own bodies create, all these energies are being fucked up from heavy metal issues because our heavy metals are all off and we don't even know where to be on it. Again, that's where the colors come in. Because see, what you're going to find out, what you're going to learn is that we all do have a colorful purpose. So whites, the whiter you go, whites are cutters, all right? When you look back, and I'm going to draw you out some blueprints and some plans and some shit, and my computers keep freezing up all the fucking time too, it pisses me off. And I was not going to swear too much in your videos. I'm going to try not to. I'm not going to go as far as putting on a collar shirt while I'm doing it, because as you can see, these videos are not about me. These videos are about showing you the system, the true creator's work, the false creator, the creator, their work, and try to let you see it, and hopefully you do. I'm going to explain shit. I'm going to try to explain shit as I go along, what I found so far, that is. And that usually doesn't work out too good. So that's why I'm trying to do everything in the form of a question. So, do you think it would be better if we all worked together, all the colors, working together, knowing the truth about it? Because see, without the blacks, we cannot push and pull things into place properly. If we're going to go from the black, in other words, the nationality, the noses, the lips, the hair, the dark skin, all these different traits, and they have a lot of other traits. The fact that they're body mass is so large, so that means they have larger hearts than us, larger livers, larger kidneys. Everything's filters larger. They can suck up more energy. The color of their skin, their pigment of their skin allows them to hold energy different than we do as white people. So if we don't give them the credit, so let me make this accusation to you. I'm waiting for this fucking thing to start going. I'm getting pissed because it's just distracting me from when I'm talking. When I'm talking, I don't like being distracted. It fucking sucks. So do you think it's possible that maybe you're going too far overboard? In other words, too far right, too far alt-right, which is a word that you hate. But are you going too far right just to make up for your fear of the left, of the far left, alt-left, right? Are you afraid that they've gone so far that you're afraid to admit what it is I'm trying to explain to you? The importance, because see, you're leaving them out. You're leaving, and I'm not accusing you of being racist. Don't think that for a second, because I don't even believe in racism. I really don't. I think it's all programming, and all the racism shit has all been programmed. So don't think that I'm saying that about you. I'm gonna try to go to another video. This sucks, man. This keeps happening too. Oh, I see, because I came out again. Yeah. There's another thing. As I'm doing videos, you'll notice my mouse will start moving on its own. All kinds of weird shit will start happening. Matter of fact, I'm going to pause it so I don't waste it. Okay, try this again. I don't know. It keeps shutting me out. I keep losing my Wi-Fi. It puts me on airplane mode. Sometimes I was starting to say that it took me about 10 minutes just to do what I just did. Now I try to remember what the hell I was even talking about. It happens all the time, these crazy distractions like this, you know. Just don't make any sense. Some street lights in this. So I think I go for a ride in this one. I'm just picking a new video. These are the research vids on there. It's got one view. Let's see what I did this day. I was in the car because I see some street lights. My mouse is not moving. What happens is I could just be sitting there, and all of a sudden I'll watch the arrow start moving around, and it'll start deleting things. They even do things sometimes that I don't even know how to do. I never know how to clip videos. I don't know how to, like, clip 10 minutes out of the middle of a video and stuff like that. I know you can go into Creator Studio and do it, but I don't know how to do it. They somehow know how to do it, because they do that a lot. I'll notice 5 minutes, 10 minutes missing here and there and stuff. I'm like, I wonder what was there that was so special, you know? So I don't know if this thing's even playing. I don't think it is. Hold on again. Okay, that took about 25 freaking minutes to reset the computer, restart it. We're gonna try this. May 20th. May 20th. Alright. Play.
When you look at Canada at the moment, what are our problems?
Well, the central underlying illness is a monstrous growth in the power and cost of the state at the expense of the agency and freedom of the people. I'm here simply restoring what already belonged to Canadians by virtue of their 800-year inheritance of English liberties going back to the Magna Carta. I'm just among the common people who are custodians of that freedom while we're alive. Edmund Burke said it's a contract between the dead, the living, and the yet to be born. And we're the living generation has the duty to pass on that inheritance. And that's what I see myself doing, is to rekindle that inheritance and pass it on to my kids, and so they can pass it on to their kids. And I'll pass away into fade away into the past one day, but hopefully we'll have secured the freedom that we inherited for many more generations to come. And that's what I mean when I want to give people back control of their life in the present. It's also to extend it into the future. So that's my purpose. That's why I'm running. People want to support me. My pierreforpm.ca that's Pierre for the number 4. PM.ca is how you can sign up, become a member, and do that. And I would be honored to have people support in this enterprise.
Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased today to have with me Mr. Pierre Poilievre. He is the current frontrunner in the race for leadership of the Federal Conservative Party of Canada, and he is therefore a likely candidate for Prime Minister of Canada within the foreseeable future, within the next few years. The Conservatives in Canada have served historically alternatively to lead Canada, competing with the Liberals primarily at the federal or national and provincial or state level, although the Liberals, their primary opponents, have been more historically successful. So they've served more terms. Mr. Poilievre served as a senior cabinet minister in Prime Minister Stephen Harper's Conservative government prior to the recent election of Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, and has served as a member of Parliament for 7 terms. And with that brief introduction, I'm going to turn the discussion over to Mr. Poilievre, who can fill us in on a little biographical information so we know who he is, and then we'll turn to more specific issues. Thanks very much for agreeing to talk to me today, and welcome.
Thanks very much, Dr. Peterson. Great to be with you.
So we'll do Jordan and Pierre. How's that?
That's fine by me.
All right, away we go. So let's start. Who are you? Where'd you come from, and how did you get interested in politics, and why are you the man for the job here?
Thank you. Well, like you, I'm from Alberta, although further south. I come from Calgary, and my folks are from Saskatchewan. They married in '77, moved to Calgary, where they adopted me. I was born of a 16-year-old unwed mother whose mother had just died, and so she was in no position to raise a child. So she put me up for adoption, and I was blessed to be adopted by Marlene and Don Poilievre, 2 teachers from Saskatchewan, and a pretty normal upbringing. Grew up in the 80s, and I was born in '79, so my early childhood was in the 80s. It was kind of a brutal time to be a homeowner or a family because there was these monstrous interest rates. So some of my earliest memories as a child were the financial stress that my folks were going through. And a lot of people were losing their homes and their livelihoods at that time. And I think that made an early impression on my thinking, even though at the time I didn't really understand what was happening or why. I was able later on to look back at that strain and stress and then try to diagnose it when I was old enough to understand. And that kind of formulated some of my political ideologies. We can return to that later on. But I grew up middle class, couple of teachers who got divorced when I was in my mid-teens, and I sort of bounced back and forth between mom and dad's place throughout my teenage years. Went to University of Calgary.
Yeah, so we do have a fair bit in common because one of my parents, my father, is a teacher. Both my parents are from Saskatchewan. They moved to Alberta. Lots of people from Saskatchewan did. I got interested in politics at an early age. I remember that period of inflation because, my father, and maybe your parents, did they lose their pensions when the banks collapsed? Because the teachers did.
Mine didn't lose their pensions. We did have to move because I think in retrospect that was because of the interest rate hikes. I'm guessing that my folks were not able to pay the mortgage at the higher rates. And then we had to move to a smaller place, and we had to sell our car and downgrade our automobile and all of the above just to kind of keep our heads above water. And that would have been, I'm guessing, around sort of 83, 84. And that was a really kind of hellish time, particularly in Alberta, because the central government had unleashed a wicked assault on the energy sector called the National Energy Program. And simultaneously, the worst of the Trudeau socialist years were coming to bear on the entire national economy. So you had 12% inflation, 12% unemployment.
24% mortgage rates. That's real fun for everyone.
Yes, and highest misery index in Canadian history. That's unemployment plus inflation.
That was under Justin's father.
Yes.
Surprise, surprise. Yes.
And here we are with the same policies leading to the same results, just as the dog returns to its vomit and the sow returns to its mire, the burn fool's bandaged finger goes wobbling back to the fire, as Kipling would write. It was a miserable time for a lot of people. Now, I was blessed because my folks were teachers, so they ultimately didn't lose their livelihoods. We had a modest upbringing, but I would never have called myself poor. And my folks worked hard to make sure we could play hockey and enjoy life, go on camping trips. So I would not cry poor, but it was a modest upbringing, one I'm very proud of, and one I'd like to pass on to my kids as well.
How old were you when you got interested in politics? And what were you like in high school?
Well, I was a scrappy kid who loved sports, and then I got a terrible tendonitis in my shoulder, which made it impossible for me to do any amateur wrestling or football or any other sports that I enjoyed. So I'd get home from school and I'd be bored out of my skull. My mom used to go and attend progressive conservative meetings. And so I said, why don't you take me to one of these meetings? Because I've got nothing to do. And she took me and I fell in love with it. And I just started reading books, all kinds about...
Oh, God, you shouldn't do that.
I'm still recovering from that. And...
So why in the world were you attracted to conservatism? Because that's not a particularly, what would you say? It's not necessarily an attractive proposition for the typical young person, although, maybe something could be done about that. So, but what attracted you to conservative philosophy?
It was a bit of a winding road. I started off by reading a lot of left-wing books and commentary and was very, very briefly persuaded by that. But then I stumbled on a book called Capitalism and Freedom by Milton Friedman. And I didn't agree with 100% of what he wrote. I still don't. However, the fundamental logic of the free market system, to me, is inescapable.
Okay, what is that logic as far as you're concerned? Why is that? Why is it inescapable?
Because in a free and open market, you can't get ahead unless you make someone else better off. So I use the old apple-orange analogy. If you have an apple and want an orange, and I have an orange and want an apple, and we trade, we're both better off, even though we still have an apple and orange between us. It's like when you go to a coffee shop and you buy a coffee, you say, thank you, to the lady who gave it to you, and then she says, not you're welcome, but she says thank you back. Now, why is that? Well, the answer is because each of you has gained something more valuable than you had before. You have the cup of coffee that's worth more than the $2.50 you paid for it. The coffee shop has the $2.50.
And why do you think the free part of that is important? So that's the trade part. Why is the free part important?
Because that's the only way to guarantee both sides believe they're better off, right? Because in the form of taxation, government forcefully imposes a transaction. It is considered to be a transaction, taxes, right? You're paying for a whole plethora of services, but you didn't choose it. So even if you've decided that the cost of your tax bill is not worth the benefit of the government services, you have to pay it anyway. Whereas back to the coffee shop, you have to, if you don't believe the coffee is worth more than the money, you won't pay it. And if they don't believe the money is worth more than the coffee, they won't sell it. So the only way in a market system to make yourself better off is to make someone else simultaneously better off.
So why did you, now look, lots of young people today either are not exposed to the ideas that you just put forward, or they don't find them persuasive, say in contrast to what appears on the surface to be the more compassionate left-wing view that's characterized frequently and sometimes realistically, by concern for the working class. Like I worked for the NDP when I was a kid, and at that time in Alberta, Grant Notley ran the NDP, and he was an old union guy in some fundamental sense, and so were most of the people he associated with, and they did have a real concern for the working class. At least some of them did, and I would say that was particularly true of the leadership. not so much the activists. But, you were pretty young when you came across Friedman. I didn't have that experience when I was, say, the same age as you. Why did you find that persuasive in contrast to the left-wing ideas, the ideas of socialism, this rooted in this hypothetical compassion that seems so attractive to kids today?
Because I didn't see the compassion playing itself out in any real way. It's a catchphrase, but what we're actually debating is not who's more compassionate, and there's no evidence that people on the socialist left are especially generous with their own money. Sure, they like to spend other people's money, but what you see is really with socialism is Animal House playing itself out over and over again. When the Animal Farm playing itself over and over again.
That's a definite difference.
Definite difference. Animal Farm, the pigs didn't say they wanted to take the house so that they could be more comfortable and spoiled. They said they were doing it to make everyone equal and to remove the oppression. But then when they actually took the house, they became the new masters and served themselves. And that's what actually happens in socialism. It doesn't eliminate hierarchy.
So why did you buy that argument? Was it as a consequence of encountering Orwell as well, or?
I think it's because I witnessed it again and again. As I studied what actually happens in socialist models, it became very clear that the rhetoric about economic equality never actually came to pass. It was used as a tool to mobilize the masses, but ultimately the outcome was to concentrate power more in the hands of the political elite. Look, government is really legalized force. So if you believe in big government, you believe in expanding force. Relationships of force always favor the powerful. In reality, those who have more political power then benefit from a bigger government. And those people are all rich, right? They are disproportionately powerful in the system. And so when this big beast called government gets bigger and more powerful, those who have the ability to steer that beast are the ones who are going to profit from it.
So what do you think of the success of countries like the Scandinavian countries, let's say, and the relative success of Canada? Because there's been a fair, solid socialist influence, more the English socialist type than the communist-derived type, fair socialist influence in Canada, and it's formed some of our fundamental institutions, our healthcare system, our pension system, a fair bit of labor legislation. I mean, when you look at, and then of course the Scandinavian countries, small though they are and homogenous though they are, they're quite radically successful in function. So what do you make of that, and how do you balance that against your emphasis on a more conservative philosophy and your support of the freest markets possible in some sense?
All right, so let's start with the Scandinavians. I mean, there's some really uncomfortable facts about the Scandinavian countries that the left would not like to talk about. Like Norway, 25% of Norway's economy is oil. So that's really tough to grapple with if you're a modern socialist. Moving to the other countries, Sweden welcomes all kinds of free enterprise and choice, including in the provision of public services. And they have, in fact, in the 90s, the Swedes moved quite dramatically to reduce the cost of government and open up markets and free enterprise. So it's not as simple as to say that these countries are socialistic and therefore successful. And I think it was even one of the Danish leaders came to the United States, and he was speaking at Harvard, and he was saying, he was all the socialist kids were expecting him to pump his fist in the air and champion socialism. He said, no, actually, we're not a socialist country. And so, there's no question they definitely do have a strong social safety net. I don't object to that. But I wouldn't say that they are state-commanded economies like we're seeing Trudeau attempt to adopt here in Canada.
Right. So you see this as variation within the free market world, right?
I do.
Variation, like there is between the Democrats and the Republicans in the U.S., but fundamentally it's a free market.
Everything is a question of degree. But there's a lot of academic literature that shows that that countries with smaller governments as a share of GDP tend to have less poverty and better social and economic growth outcomes. And that is true in both the developing world and the developed world. I do believe that you can provide a solid social safety net at the same time as having a powerful free market economy that generates the wealth to fund that safety net.
Okay, so you got interested in politics. So were you a popular kid in high school, would you say?
Off and on, there were times when I was interested in hanging out and being part of the club, but there were other times when I just didn't care. Once I got involved in politics, I couldn't care less about the social life at high school anymore.
How old were you? Were you when that transition took place? You said that
16.
was also 16.
Yeah, 16, 17. Like I said, I kind of wasn't able to do any more sports, and so I said, I'm going to go do something else. And once I took that part of my life took off,
you didn't look
the
back.
social life. No, I had like my early teens. I loved hanging out with my friends and playing sports and stuff. But once I found a new passion, I became more focused on that.
How did that influence your choice of education when you went off to university? And that was at did you say University of Calgary?
That's right. Yes. I wanted to do a generalist liberal arts kind of program, and so I did international relations, which had some econ, a lot of history, some strategic studies, a little bit of poli-sci, and it was a good overview, a jack of all trades kind of Bachelor of Arts, and it worked well.
And was that in hypothetical service of your political ambitions at that point, or had they catalyzed?
I don't know that my political ambitions were clearly defined at that point. I just knew I was generally interested in politics, and that international relations would give me an overview of almost all parts of that one confronts in a political environment.
And did you have a conception of a career path at that time? Or I mean, lots of people don't. They go to take a Bachelor of Arts. They have an interest, and I'm not saying that a career path, specifying one is necessary. I'm just curious as to how you envisioned your future when you were pursuing your degree, and then what happened afterwards.
I'm trying to remember exactly, but I don't think I knew exactly what paths I was going to take. I just knew that I wanted to fight for certain things that I believed in, and that would probably take me into the political theater.
Were you active in campus politics?
Yeah, I was involved with the campus. It was then the campus Progressive Conservatives and Reform Party, and involved in the debate club and stuff like that. We used to have a place called Speaker's Corner. It was like 3 floors of balconies where people could look down, and someone would stand on a big stool in the middle and shout out a speech. And the Speaker's Corner would meet every Friday, and there'd be lots of heckling, and it was just a rowdy affair, but mostly about hilarity and joking around and giving silly, ridiculous addresses. That was the Friday tradition. We'd go and belt out these speeches. To sometimes 70 or 80 students would come and take in these speeches. And I imagine if we had the phone cameras back then, they'd probably be circulating widely on the internet right now.
No doubt. God, what a horrible fate, to have everything you do when you're young recorded and never forgotten. So yeah, well, you seem to have a sense of humor about such things too, and you're kind of viciously satirical in the House of Commons. And so what role do you think having a sense of humor plays in what you do?
I think it's important. I try to remember it because politics is a combat sport, but there has to be some joy in it as well. And you have to make people feel good. The Rabbi Hillel said, people won't